It was a day that would be etched in their memories forever, the day they first locked eyes at the police academy. Detective Emeka, a ruggedly handsome young man with a sharp jawline and piercing gaze, had just arrived at the academy, his confidence radiating like a beacon. Detective Neoma, a stunning beauty with porcelain skin and raven black hair, was already a top performer, her intelligence and wit earning her a reputation as a force to be reckoned with. Their initial encounter was like a collision of two opposing forces. Emeka, fresh from a stellar performance in hand-to-hand combat training, strode into the lecture hall, his broad shoulders back, and his head held high. Neoma, seated in the front row, her eyes fixed intently on the instructor, sensed his presence and turned. Their eyes met, and the air seemed to vibrate with tension. Emeka's gaze lingered on Neoma, his expression a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. Who was this woman who seemed to be sucking up all the attention? Neoma, feeling his eyes on her, turned back to face him, her eyes flashing with a warning, "Don't even think about it, buddy." Emeka's lips curled into a smirk, and he took a seat, his eyes never leaving hers. The instructor's voice faded into the background as they engaged in a silent game of cat and mouse. Emeka's smirk morphed into a scowl, while Neoma's eyes narrowed, her gaze piercing through his facade. The tension between them was palpable, like a live wire waiting to spark. Their colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the animosity emanating from the two. "Wow, those two are like fire and ice," someone whispered. "I give them a week before they either kill each other or," another officer trailed off, leaving the unspoken possibility hanging in the air. As the days turned into weeks, their mutual dislike only intensified. Emeka saw Neoma as a goody-goody, always sucking up to the instructors, while Neoma viewed Emeka as a reckless hothead, always looking for a fight. Their disagreements became the stuff of legend, with their classmates gathering to watch the fireworks. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of a tumultuous journey, one that would test their resolve, push them to the edge, and ultimately, lead them to a revelation that would change their lives forever. Years had passed since their tumultuous days at the police academy, and both Emeka and Neoma had forged successful careers in their respective roles. Emeka, now a seasoned detective, had built a reputation as a maverick who got results, no matter the cost. Neoma, on the other hand, had risen through the ranks with her razor-sharp mind and unwavering dedication to justice. But fate, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. The news of Emeka's transfer to Neoma's branch hit her like a thunderbolt. She felt the air sucked out of her lungs as she stared at the memo in her hand, her eyes scanning the page as if searching for an escape clause. Emeka, the bane of her existence, was coming to her turf. Neoma's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. She envisioned Emeka's smirking face, his condescending attitude, and his reckless disregard for protocol. How could she possibly work alongside him? The mere thought sent her blood pressure soaring, her heart racing like a runaway train. As the day of Emeka's arrival drew near, Neoma's anxiety grew. She found herself pacing the halls, her eyes fixed on the clock, counting down the minutes until the inevitable collision. Her colleagues noticed her agitation and whispered among themselves, sensing the storm brewing. The morning of Emeka's arrival, Neoma stood outside the office, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the door. She watched as Emeka walked in, his confident stride and charming smile making her blood boil. Their eyes met, and the air seemed to crackle with tension. "Well, Emeka said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who's waiting for me. The Queen of Perfection herself." Neoma's eyes narrowed, her voice low and even. "Emeka. Welcome to our branch. I'm sure you'll fit right in." The tension between them was palpable, a living, breathing entity that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. Their colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the impending storm. As they began to work together, the sparks flew. Emeka's devil-may-care attitude clashed with Neoma's by-the-book approach. Every case, every lead, every decision became a battleground. Their disagreements escalated into heated debates, their voices raised in a crescendo of conflict. It seemed as though their partnership was doomed from the start, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. But little did they know, this was only the beginning of a dangerous dance, one that would push them to the edge and force them to confront the secrets they'd been hiding from each other and themselves. The high-profile murder investigation was like a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode in their faces. Emeka and Neoma, both renowned experts in their field, were thrust together to crack the case. But their personal animosity was a wild card, threatening to derail the entire operation. As they arrived at the crime scene, the tension between them was palpable. Emeka's eyes scanned the area, his mind racing with theories, while Neoma meticulously examined every detail, her gaze lingering on the smallest clues. Their initial exchange was like a spark to gasoline. "This is a classic case of revenge killing," Emeka declared, his voice laced with confidence. Neoma raised an eyebrow. "You can't be serious. The evidence points to a calculated, premeditated act." Emeka snorted. "You're overthinking it, as usual." Neoma's eyes flashed. "And you're not thinking at all, as usual." Their colleagues exchanged worried glances, sensing the impending implosion. The air was thick with tension as they began to process the scene, their every move scrutinized by the other. As they interviewed witnesses, their disagreements escalated. Emeka's aggressive questioning style clashed with Neoma's more measured approach. Every statement, every gesture, became a point of contention. "This witness is clearly hiding something," Emeka growled. Neoma countered, "You're intimidating them, Emeka. Let me handle it." Their voices rose, the argument simmering just below the surface. The witnesses grew uneasy, their testimonies tainted by the detectives' animosity. As the investigation unfolded, the stakes grew higher. Emeka and Neoma found themselves at odds over every aspect of the case. Their usually exceptional skills were compromised by their personal vendetta. One fateful night, as they pored over the evidence, their disagreement turned into a full-blown shouting match. The tension snapped, and they both said things they'd later regret. The next morning, they were summoned to the chief's office, their suspension looming like a guillotine. Their colleagues whispered in hushed tones, wondering if the once dynamic duo had finally imploded. As they stood before the chief, their fate hanging in the balance, Emeka and Neoma realized that their personal demons had put the entire case and their careers at risk. Would they find a way to put aside their differences and work together, or would their deadly rivalry be the downfall of justice? The night had started like any other, Emeka and Neoma poring over the case files, searching for a breakthrough. But as the hours wore on, their frustration grew. Emeka's sarcastic remarks and Neoma's sharp retorts escalated into a full-blown shouting match. In the heat of the moment, Emeka hurled a devastating insult, striking at the very core of Neoma's professionalism. Neoma, her eyes blazing with fury, shot back with a vicious barb, questioning Emeka's integrity. The words hung in the air like a challenge, the tension between them crackling with electricity. The argument ended abruptly, leaving behind a deafening silence. The next morning, they were summoned to the chief's office, their suspension looming like a dark cloud. As they stood before the chief, their heads hung low in shame, the weight of their actions settling in. "Your behavior was unacceptable," the chief rebuked, his voice firm but disappointed. "You're both brilliant detectives, but your personal animosity has compromised the case. I have no choice but to suspend you both until further notice." The news hit them like a ton of bricks. Emeka's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched in anger, while Neoma's eyes welled up with tears, her face etched with regret. As they left the chief's office, their careers in jeopardy, they realized that their rivalry had gone too far. The question now was, could they find a way to put aside their differences and work together, or would their suspension be the end of their partnership? The days that followed were a blur of self-reflection and soul-searching. Emeka and Neoma went their separate ways, each trying to come to terms with their actions. But as the silence between them grew, they began to realize that their rivalry had masked a deeper truth, a truth that would change everything. As the days passed, Emeka and Neoma found themselves with an unexpected gift: time. Time to reflect, time to think, and time to confront the demons they'd been avoiding. Emeka, once convinced of his own superiority, began to see Neoma in a different light. He remembered her razor-sharp mind, her tireless work ethic, and her unwavering commitment to justice. He realized that his pride had blinded him to her exceptional skills and dedication. Neoma, too, had an epiphany. She saw Emeka's passion, his drive, and his willingness to take risks. She began to understand that his rough exterior hid a deep sense of purpose and conviction. As they both delved deeper into their own thoughts, they started to wonder, was their animosity just a mask for something more? Something they'd been denying, even to themselves. Emeka couldn't shake off the memory of Neoma's piercing gaze, her sharp wit, and her unwavering confidence. Neoma, on the other hand, found herself replaying Emeka's charming smile, his fearless attitude, and his unrelenting pursuit of justice. The more they reflected, the more they realized that their rivalry might be rooted in a secret attraction. An attraction they'd been denying, hiding behind their animosity and pride. As the truth began to dawn on them, they felt a mix of emotions: shock, excitement, and a hint of fear. What did this mean for their partnership, their careers, and their hearts? With their suspension still in effect, Emeka and Neoma decided to meet in secret, away from prying eyes and wagging tongues. They chose a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, a place where they could finally confront the elephant in the room. As they sat across from each other, the tension between them was palpable. But this time, it wasn't just about rivalry or anger. It was about something more, something that could change everything. Neoma's eyes widened as she opened the door to find Emeka standing on her porch, a bottle of wine in hand. She hadn't expected him to make the first move, especially not after their tumultuous past. But something about his gentle smile and sincere gaze put her at ease. "Peace offering?" Emeka asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Neoma nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "I suppose I can accept that." As they sat down in her cozy living room, Emeka poured the wine, and they began to talk. Really talk. For the first time, they engaged in a conversation that wasn't laced with sarcasm or competition. Emeka shared stories about his childhood, his passion for justice, and his fears. Neoma opened up about her own struggles, her drive to succeed, and her dreams. The more they talked, the more they found common ground. The walls they'd built around themselves began to crumble, brick by brick. They laughed together, their eyes locking in a way that made Neoma's heart skip a beat. As the night wore on, Emeka reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair behind Neoma's ear. The touch sent shivers down her spine. "I'm sorry," Emeka said, his voice low and husky. "For everything. I was blind to your brilliance, Neoma. You're an exceptional detective, and an even more exceptional person." Neoma's eyes welled up with tears. "I'm sorry too, Emeka. I was so focused on proving myself that I didn't see your strengths. You're a true partner, and a remarkable human being." In that moment, something shifted between them. The air was electric with possibility, and they both knew that their relationship would never be the same again. With their newfound understanding and respect for each other, Emeka and Neoma dove back into the murder case with renewed enthusiasm. They worked tirelessly, sharing ideas and insights, their collaboration seamless and effortless. Their fresh perspective and combined brilliance led them to a breakthrough in the case. They discovered a crucial piece of evidence that had gone unnoticed earlier, and it pointed to the killer. With the murderer identified and brought to justice, Emeka and Neoma received widespread recognition for their exceptional work. Their colleagues and superiors praised their dedication, expertise, and teamwork. As they stood together, basking in the glow of their triumph, Emeka turned to Neoma and smiled. "You know, I couldn't have done it without you." Neoma's eyes sparkled with agreement. "I couldn't have done it without you either, Emeka. We make an unbeatable team." And in that moment, they knew that their partnership had evolved into something more meaningful. They had discovered a deep respect and trust in each other, a bond that went beyond mere colleagues. As they walked out of the police station, Emeka turned to Neoma and asked, "You know, would you like to grab a drink with me? Not as partners, but as friends." Neoma's smile lit up the evening. "I'd love to, Emeka. Let's celebrate our victory and our newfound friendship." And with that, they sealed their newfound connection, ready to face future challenges together, as friends and partners in every sense of the word. Emeka and Neoma's journey from sworn enemies to inseparable partners was a testament to the transformative power of forgiveness, trust, and understanding. Their story served as a reminder that even the most unlikely of duos can become the closest of friends, and that sometimes, it takes a little bit of forced collaboration to discover the beauty of unity. As they stood together, basking in the glory of their triumph, Emeka and Neoma knew that their partnership was only just beginning. They had cracked the murder case, but more importantly, they had cracked the code to a deeper connection. Their once rocky relationship had evolved into a beacon of hope, a shining example of what can happen when we let go of our preconceptions and embrace the unknown. Emeka and Neoma's friendship was a reminder that love and hate are not mutually exclusive, but rather, they are two sides of the same coin, waiting to be flipped. And so, the unlikely duo continued to work together, solving crimes and breaking down barriers, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They proved that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of hope, and that sometimes, it takes a little bit of hate to find a whole lot of love.